go into the information. And for us, we determined that check level expenditure was the right depth and provided just exceedingly beneficial information to all of our constituents who cared. And the final was privacy. New York City, in its size, as with many other cities, needed to have its pulse around the issues that could not be let out into the public as relates to anti-terrorism or some of the other activities of our certain lawyers and public defendants. So we made sure we put the appropriate privacy safeguards in place that we could protect the information while at the same time making the city as transparent as possible. The second challenge was around data management. And the quick synopsis of this is one was data size. We needed to find a way to compress this data that it was manageable and we could build around it. The scale that you see here is over time, it's growing in size. The database is growing in size, but still relatively manageable. There exist millions of rows, hundreds of millions of rows, and about 314 tables that are reference points for checkbook. And we're updating about 1.6 million transactions monthly. And that includes everything from the change in a contract to updating the duration to any of the check level information that comes in. What was salient and extremely important for us is that all of the information was downloadable. And as that stands today, that's about 61.5 million transactions that are available for download. So if you are searching for a particular vendor or agency across a calendar year or fiscal year, you should be able to drill down into that information with ease. There were reactions to this, which I'll go through very quickly. The first, after the hard work of almost 3 years of building, is that we built a best-in-class system. And I'll just quickly read what US PIRG, which is the U.S. Public Interest Research Group, they did a study on the top cities, and New York was happy and proud to come at a top score off of our beta version, not even the current checkbook that you see now. But the quote reads, New York City transparency website excels ahead of all other transparency websites assessed in this report. There's probably not a major corporation in America that can keep track of its own spending as comprehensively, much less as openly as New York City. And we're proud of that. That was our goal, is to be best in class, and also to make sure that we're drilling down and opening up as much of our data as possible. Because of that, sure.
Sorry, this is Ian. If I can just go back for a second,
yeah.
I don't know if you can go back to that slide. Did you intentionally leave off Boston because you knew they were going to join the webinar, or
I
was it just not part of the study?
Did not. They were not part of this particular study, or I would have most.
Actually, this is Kurt over Boston, and we actually got a D on that study. So.
Oh no.
Well, see, I was trying to save face for you, Boston, and not tell your score.
Well,
this is only the top 10. We'll put it that way. I only put the top 10 on here.
Andrew, okay, well, we'll probably come back then to why Boston was there in that point at that time, and obviously what they've done to dramatically excel. Sorry for interrupting, Patricia. I was just looking at that list going, why do I feel like somebody's not on here? Okay, sorry, please go ahead.
Fine. Yes, I only put the top 10, so there was no slight to Boston. I'm sure they will join us. But through opening up our information, as you can bet, and anyone who may be on the line who has a first question, which is, well, what happens after you make all of this information public? And that is headlines. And the city was not protected from this. So from the moment that we put checkbook out, here you can see of August of 2010, the New York Post, and I'll just reach back in history to find some things, the New York Post quickly put out a report within 48 hours that said, you know, the city pigs out and you pay. And they had headlines like the city council is, you know, using about $5,000 in coffee, and that there's this, you know, $2,000 that we used at the Brooklyn Fish and Eye, and even the comptroller's office wasn't without its own moment in the press. And so that's part of this process, is taking ownership of that and allowing our our citizens to have an open view of what we're doing and how we're spending their taxpayer dollars. The final reaction has been something that we worked very hard at, and which I encourage all folks that are interested in building a transparency system to truly take stock. So not only is it on the first side, which is using open source technologies where possible to build your system, but the second is that you're employing an open source and or at least an open environment of which others can grab your data, and that can be multiple ways. So for us, it was at the very rudimentary level through data feeds and an API that allowed people to, obviously download our databases as they see fit and connect directly to the data and build apps on top of that. The second is to actually be open source, and that's to put our code in the GitHub repository under New York City Comptroller /checkbook and allow anyone who so chooses to use that as the beginning framework for building their own checkbook system, or at least, if nothing else, to peek into the lens of what New York City has done and possibly the mistakes that we've made and things we need to improve, so we can all work together at building a better system. I will stop there and happy to answer any other questions or talk more about the New York City platform.
Well, certainly. Well, Adrisha, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to take a quick gander at the folks that have been asking questions. We have a few trickling in. For those that are attending, we encourage you to fire your questions into the WebEx panel on the bottom right-hand corner of the viewing window, and we'll get to, I think we'll probably save a few of them to the end, because as I'm just glancing here, I'm getting a few questions from different channels, and I think there are some they would apply to both cities. But I'll almost ask a quick one. So much of this work feels like it is an innovation on top of old practices or existing practices. And if maybe you can just explain, why is this something that is coming out of the controller's office? Has this information been made public before, or is this just new numbers that have never before been seen? Is it the technology that's different? I'm trying to figure out the fit.
Sure. That's an absolutely phenomenal question. So New York City has been publishing its financial data in large data sets, much to the thanks of platforms like Socrata, that has allowed folks to get their hands on the information. But as those may be familiar, those are large data sets of which you have to have some sort of comfortable skill to be able to download the data and manipulate it and create the type of report that you want to. And so because New York City is in a bit of a different position than many other states, but not completely unique, that our comptroller, our elected official, Scott Stringer, is a fiduciary of the city's financial information. And
right.
His charged responsibility of being that fiduciary and making sure that he's minimizing waste and fraud and taking a look at cost overruns, taking that data out of large data exports and putting them into a searchable GUI interface was definitely under his belt to do. And so that's why it's important for us, because we really want New Yorkers to be able to get their hands on this data no matter your skill level and to find the answers to questions that you have.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that answers my question absolutely, and I can see the leadership that comes out of your office. Even the headline that you mentioned from the New York Post. You're sure that there is some press about your own office, and talk about the level of transparency. It's transparency on transparency, which is
exactly
really
right. No
impressive.
one can hide.
And it's a fantastic demonstration of leadership. Well, thank you so much for sharing those experiences and insights. It's a tough topic. People are funny about money, and the way people spend money is a reflection of their values. And it's really interesting to see the leadership that New York City has taken to be clear about that and demonstrate where the city is investing and how effectively it's doing it. Okay, so for fun, let's shift over now to Boston. Boston is also a leader, of course, in the world of financial transparency. But I'd like to pitch it over to Chris and Kurt to talk a bit about how they are approaching this topic more from the performance management perspective. And so with that, Chris, Kurt, who should start here?
This is Kurt. I'll start a little bit just because give a little background on kind of how we got to this point, and then I'll let Chris take over for since he is in the administration and finance department, some of the specifics about like data around budget and checkbook. So we started a few years ago. We had open data pre-Socrata. For lack of a thing, we didn't do it very well, and it was kind of a sticking point. And I had approached the CIO at the time and said, you know, we're looking kind of bad on this. And he's like, I agree. What do you want to do? So that's how we ended up going with Socrata and kind of having maybe not a formal process of data, but certainly having a more robust one that I think while we're still maybe behind New York a little bit, we're, you know, at least in the conversation. And then last year, as Adisha pointed out, the U.S. Purge report on financial transparency in, you know, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, several of what we consider our peer cities in this space looking really good, and then Boston coming in with a D. I remember the CFO at the time being quite clear. She said that she had never received a D as a grade at any point in her life, so she was kind of put off by that, and you know, that started the conversation about, all right, how do we change this? Because we didn't really have, you know, expenditure information out in any real sense, and our budget stuff was only buried in 3 million pages of PDFs that, you know, you really have to care about the budget to bother with. So last year we launched on Socrata the Open Checkbook platform because one of the concerns was, well, we don't want to just give people, here's some raw data, but we also want to allow them to explore the data and look at different things, either, you know, by topic or you know, department, give people a little bit better way to understand the context of those things. And then right now we have the open budget application is being developed and hopefully, you know, coming out rather soon, since our budget season is upon us and new fiscal year starts in less than a month. All right, so our open data, like I said, it's on Socrata's portal. It's really good for looking at all these data sets. You know, our friends in New York are on the same thing. Chicago's on the same thing. And many of you are probably on the same thing. And that's really changed how we put out data. But in regards to budget and checkbook, it kind of served as not just as a background like we can host data, but it started to change the conversation in City Hall of, you know, of course there's the articles and the bad headlines and all that, but there's so many other things you can do with data, and it's starting to change the culture of City Hall to think that, all right, putting data out there doesn't just mean the newspaper is going to come and roast us alive. You know, there's apps that can be built, there's good analysis that can be done, there's partnerships that can be made, and that's kind of where we went with that.
Hi, everyone. Chris Dwell here with the City of Boston. So as Kurt has said, and giving you a little background of kind of where we were with open data and some of the information that we posted on there, I was going to talk a little bit about our efforts around kind of financial transparency, which is where we were clearly lacking. So up until we received this D, you know, some folks thought we were in a good place. You know, we were publishing a lot of data sets, people were using them, and people really enjoyed it. But around the financial portion, we were really lacking there. I think we were posting information about payroll data as well as some contract data, but there wasn't really a robust area around financial transparency, and the Public Interest Research Group came out with their report card now that you have seen, and we were at the bottom, pretty much at the bottom with a D. The report really focused on cities' financial transparency efforts. So when that came out, it was clear that, you know, we needed to do a little bit more in this space. So the immediate thought was, you know, let's it's time that we now start publishing this information to our open portal, get it out there so that people can access it. So, you know, that was our immediate thought. And then as we were discussing this, we thought, let's take this actually a step further. And in addition to pushing the information out, let's put an application on top that actually allows people to absorb this information in an easier way than, let's say, someone in the academic space or someone in the tech space that could really use the raw data. So let's bring this to a level where folks can just hop online and can click through and see where the city is spending money. So we partnered with Socrata, who's hosting our open data portal to build our open checkbook application, and some of the imagery you see on your screen now. It's a really great user-friendly interactive site. Folks can search all this information by department, they can search it by vendor, they can search it by expenditure type, and they can further break that down so they can go into, BPS or the collecting division or our public works department and actually see what they're spending over time. And then similar to New York, we go down to the check line expenditure level there so that people kind of see the full perspective from all the way at the top level all the way to the line item. So we released that, and a lot of folks, we got some great fanfare from that. People were pleased that we were putting that out. People enjoyed it. And we thought, let's continue to build on this. And kind of the next stage for us was an open budget application. So currently the city publishes every year a 3-volume budget book that folks can access on our website. It is currently a PDF, and it is hundreds of pages that folks have to scroll through. So we thought, what not better way than to actually just push this information out on our portal and then build an application on top of it so that people can actually see where the city is allocating resources. It gives them a chance to kind of see some of the priorities of the administration in ways that we allocate funding. So we are working with Socrata on this. We hope to actually release this fairly soon. And we're looking forward to get it out there. Some of the benefits here, in addition to increased transparency and allowing the public to have a easy-to-use interface, some of the other things, folks can actually now see capital projects in their neighborhood, which is something that couldn't be easily done with our current layout of publishing this information. So that's where we're heading on open budget, and I'll push it back actually over to Kurt, who's going to talk about kind of where we are heading in the future of financial transparency and open data as well.
All right, so I'm assuming I don't have to sing the praises of open data to this audience too much, but the keys that these cultural kind of changes are happening. That's interesting.
Not sure what's going on there.
I don't know what that's about. There's a chanting going on or something. I don't know. People are excited about open data.
So sorry, please go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So like I was saying, the cultural things of open data we're starting to see them in executive leadership, and that is really changing the kind of work in the trenches here. So I mean, it's been me and people like Chris that have kind of grabbed onto this stuff early. We're definitely the early adopters within City Hall, but now we're starting to see all those values of, like, okay, well, people aren't hitting the city with 5 million FOIA requests or public records requests and, getting angry because of the delay and all that. It's like, all right, point them to, the site, get them looking at this stuff regularly, get them being a partnership in government as opposed to this weird invisible wall between, what people's government does and what they want it to do, and, that communication. It's really opening up things in a different channel than what has ever happened, I think, prior to like 5-6 years ago. Like, a lot of these things just weren't possible at this scale and weren't able to really do anything like this. I mean, we're seeing, hackathons and the Code for America people and some of the other organizations on national and local level really take interest in this. And I think at first it was that adversarial sense, but now it's becoming that real partnership kind of stuff. But where are we going in Boston from here? It's more data, better data. We have now an executive order signed by the mayor. We have policy, procedure. We have all of these things coming together in an official capacity that we never had before. And I'd really like more people using the data, more interaction. I think Boston has already shown over the past couple of years that our hallmark is really engagement. And where we don't necessarily have as much data as some of the other cities or whatever, we pride ourselves on being able to connect to people and engage with people and interact at, a level that people don't expect from their government. So I think that's been key to our success. And I think the budget part, the checkbook part, the regular open data offerings, all of these things are kind of working together. It'll be interesting to see what the next phase is. Some of the other things that we're working on is open law, getting legal stuff and ordinances and things like that in an open data framework. So there's so many different things that are, the next horizon for this data. And, each one has been critical. Each one has surprised us in how people respond and what they get out of it. And I think, letting that process kind of go organically and dictate where we go from here is important.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Kurt and Chris. I completely agree with you. Kurt, you mentioned an interesting thing about trying to break down this, I think you said the actual quote was this weird invisible wall. And I think that's a good way to summarize a lot of I think the feelings that people have and the frustrations that they've had in the past, both from the citizen side trying to understand how the government is functioning, and frankly, from my perspective, working within a number of other governments, government employees having this weird invisible wall about how to reach out to their constituents, their residents, their customers,
and trying to help and understand. An outward, inward kind of thing, but we've actually seen some with the open data portal itself, more so than say the budget or the checkbook functions. One of the carrots from one of the departments was we can't sort out our own data amongst ourselves. So they were doing specific research that would produce, some real research quality data sets that, if the mayor called this office and said, hey, can you get us the number on blah, blah, blah for the mayor's speech? They'd be like, oh, yeah, we did that research. That was this analyst, and it's on his, hard drive. What was that file called? It became this nightmare of even sorting out stuff that, had no problem being made public, but they couldn't even sort it out amongst themselves. So
internally.
So just being able to open up and organize for themselves, for them was the key. And then the extra benefit was, the public side of it is just, icing on the cake for them.
That's a great point. We had the same thing in New York City with over 100+ agencies, and just a few number of those employees with access to the centralized accounting system. This allowed everyone now to have access to the data. It's a great point.
From Socrata's perspective, we have data on our data, of course, and it's fun to watch how this plays out in terms of the internal data sharing. In a way, is that even open data? And sometimes it's just the good old-fashioned problem of I can't find the stuff I need to do my job. We actually track a lot of the data flows for new programs, new open data portals, and recognize, of course, that New York City and Boston are at different stages. But it's fun for us to watch that in the beginning, easily half of the data flows are not traditional open data, which is maybe a broadcast inside government to outside government. Many times, half of the data flows are just internal. It's between different offices. It's the Department of Public Health to the tax department to the controller's office. And that is how things start, because that's often how the value proposition is presented to governments. It's about saving time. That's the first value proposition. And I also think it's actually very interesting to see, obviously it's just illuminating to see the similarities between New York City and Boston in that regard. So we're actually running a bit over on time. I'm already 2 minutes past our schedule. I'm not sure if folks had a hard stop, and maybe I can go back to Adrisha to have a final word. I'm seeing questions coming in actually though. Oh, here they are. Oh, confusingly, I apologize for our host. I thought the questions were going to be coming in via the Q&A, but they've been chatted to me. So I need to look at these chat questions, and hopefully don't have a hard stop right away. But let me see if I can at least get to a couple of these. So first question, where should an organization start? How can an organization dip a toe into financial transparency?
Sure. I'll take a first stab, and then please, Chris, jump in as you see fit. For New York City, we started with our expenditure data that checks out the door with a few agencies. So we picked those that we had the best sense of for the time frame. It was honestly the comptroller's office, and we went back to our centralized accounting system. If you don't have that, whatever large database you're using to keep expenditure information or checks out the door information on, taking an export of that is the first step. And as you build the process around that, you can scale it to start to include more departments or agencies, depending on how you're structured, and then from there, add on other domains, which is what we call it here in New York City. So we started with spending, but then we grew into contracts, into payroll, into budget, but those were added on after we had the basis of our spending domain done.
Yeah, I would agree with Adrisha's statement about kind of starting small and piecing things out and kind of being able to manage small data sets so you don't get overwhelmed. I think that's very helpful, and that was honestly really how we started over here in Boston as well with the financial side, as I mentioned, releasing small subsets of financial data, payroll information, contract information as well, and then we kind of continued to evolve from there, obviously, with checkbook, and then now with our budget efforts. So that is, I think, is very helpful and something to keep in mind as folks are getting started out.
And this is Ian. I'll just add one more piece from my experience briefly. Even if you're not doing any open data yet, I actually think that financial data is a great place to start. And I say that because financial data is almost always one of the top 10 data sets, so to speak, or the categories on websites and other public hearings that people seem to care about the most. It's the highest traffic. It's the most questions. It gets the most attention. So even, beyond even, or before you even get to financial transparency, just government transparency, financial data is a really rich, obviously, as you see here from these stories, it's a rich place to start. So let me go to just maybe one more question. A lot of the other questions that have been coming in, I think we've gotten to in different areas already. So I'll just, how do I want to phrase this? Let me combine a couple of questions to say, what is the citizen response to financial transparency? I think we talked a bit about newspapers. We talked a bit about elected officials. We talked a bit about inside government. What about the people? What about your residents? How have they responded?
Absolutely. That has been a process for us to understand how we deeply engage with them now that this information is out there. So the response has, one, been welcoming, because it has been as simple as people who go to their community boards, if others are organized in that way as well, they go to their community board meetings, and they're now able to sit in on those meetings after doing their own research or following along as the board president is speaking about expenditures, and can now say, oh, well, there's a road that we know was supposed to be paved 2 years ago. Here's the contract that that is out there, where does this stand? And so the response has been for New Yorkers to dig deeper in the information and to actually pull on the ears of those who have direct connections to the contract holders or other agencies. The other way that we've seen it, so it's informed decisions within their own neighborhood, is also communication among themselves and being informed of just where New York City stands. So when it comes time for an article to be published about spending that happens in New York City public schools, or our bus system, for example, which ships over 1 million students a year, now they can have an informed discussion about what the city is really spending on that, what the contracts look like, and so they're digging into that information. Curiosity, that's the way I would summarize it. They've been more curious.
Let me ask you a quick follow-up on that before I give a chance for Chris and Kurt to respond. We've actually had another question come in from Paul Fagan. I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. How does that go? How does that curiosity translate into, quote, involvement in spending? It's an interesting point here. I'm not sure I'm paraphrasing the question correctly, but it touches a bit on what you said here. I think the intent is not just getting data, but taking action on the data.
That's exactly right. So I'll answer it if I believe that I understand this question correctly in 2 ways. So one way of involvement is by having our New Yorkers more allow them to have a clearer view into the spending of the city. They're able to now make suggestions back to the city in a more informed way. And how that's taken place is every year, as with many other places, we have a discretionary budgeting conversation where we discuss, how we should spend taxpayer dollars on the portion of the budget that is flexible to do so. And the recommendations that come in now allow us to have a two-way conversation, not only with their suggestions of how we should be spending money, but actual comparison about how the city has been spending money. So it's been able to be informed. Yeah.
So this is Kurt. I would say, so from, what Adisha's talking about with the kind of making a better democracy is definitely one side of it. The other side of it that I see is looking at how things are spent, and it's changed the engagement of people with the city of, hey, you're spending, X number of dollars on this. There's maybe a lightweight way to do that for a tenth the price. Whether you're talking strictly software and going more towards open source, or smaller types of software development, local startups, some of those kinds of options, whether it's researchers trying to help us, understand from an operations perspective how to do things better. I think the financial piece of it and what the city spends on certain services or certain, assets informs that, and say, not just a budgetary, like city council type of level, but also in a procurement level, in a, hey, government, there's a better way to do what you're trying to do that you may not have ever thought of. So it informs that kind of operations level way. And from a cultural, there's obviously direct things that we've done in Boston with that, but there's also that cultural stuff of, well, now we're not just thinking of, hey, I need software. Okay, well, let me talk to the corporate giants in the software world, and they can put in bids for this. But, hey, is there another way to do this? Can we do something that's, lightweight, open source, whatever, to solve these problems in a good way that is more flexible for the city and cost effective? So it's changing that whole conversation.
I would completely agree with that. The way that I would add to that, we've seen it play out in New York City, although this wasn't from an everyday citizen perspective, but from a small business perspective, which is now they could go into the system and do competitive analysis or offer their services when they see that there's, a large contract that's just been awarded and possibly that's being farmed out to subcontractors. There's now a scout for job and opportunity that's happening because the information is made available within 24 hours.
Excellent. Wow, so a lot of stuff covered here. I think we are sufficiently over perhaps the original time that I may have to do the unfortunate thing of cutting this webinar short. But thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing their experiences and insights. I think it's really fascinating when we talk about finance. It's not just spending the people's money. It's how do you use the people's data? How do you deliver better services to them? And even just these last examples of opening up even the process and culture of government so that we can collaboratively work together to achieve these common goals is a real inspiration. I'll close off by saying, again, a big thank you to Trisha Wimberly from New York City, Chris Dorelli and Kurt Savoy from Boston. This is Ian Kalin from Socrata. Thank you all to all that participated in firing in your questions. We encourage you to keep up with the next event. If you're curious to see a recording of this webinar or find out about future ones, please feel free to check out the website, socrata.com/webinars. And of course, we will always be standing by to support a number of organizations with financial trailblazing. Thank you all again so very much, and I wish you all a fantastic day.